become part of the audience to watch. But welcome to, again, to Wild Birds University. This is the last class of the fall semester. We take January off and then we'll crank it back up in February for 4 classes. But today, again, I am going to talk about the native birds that help to create a the native plants, trees, shrubs, flowers that will attract even more birds or birds' life around your property, like that wonderful, wonderful cedar waxwings. They eat berries, so you need to have something out there primarily with berries on it if you want to see one. And if you see one cedar waxwings, you see 30. They're like passenger pigeons used to be before cedar waxwings travel in flocks. So if you see one, look around, go, oh my goodness. First, I will cover the flowers. It's not too early to start thinking about putting out flowers that hummingbirds will like. Hummingbirds won't be back usually until first week of April, but you can still start thinking about, oh, I should plant some flowers that hummingbirds will like over here. Red buckeye is actually a very smallish tree. I have one, and it blooms early, usually the end of March, and it blooms really before the leaves come on the tree. It's not like the big towering yellow buckeye, but it's smallish, and it's a red tubular flower, a cluster of them, and hummingbirds love it. And some of the studies seem as the red buckeye starts to bloom further and further north every day, the hummingbirds follow it. So I have one, and when I see, oh my goodness, it's blooming, that's when I start getting my feeders out, getting them clean and getting ready to go. So that's red buckeye. Coral honeysuckle is a native honeysuckle, and if you got an area like a wall or a border or the side of your house, it's a vine that will cover. It'll cover. It blooms very early, red tubular flowers that hummingbirds love, and they're specially equipped to reach in and take a tiny sip of nectar and then give pollen all over their faces, so they help pollinate this. And again, flowers create nectar for things like hummingbirds to sip on, but it is just a tiny sip. They don't create a half gallon like you do or a pint in your hummingbird feeder. So they'll sip, 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 and then come over to your feeder, get a good drink. So a coral honeysuckle. You have to kind of check around town to some of the nurseries that do specialize in native plants, and they are in the area. But that's coral honeysuckle. It's beautiful. It blooms very early, so you can tell it's kind of evolved to be a pair with the hummingbirds as they come back early. Columbine, there's not very many things out there that can pollinate a columbine because a hummingbird flies upside down, because the very tip tops are where those sips of nectar are, and the hummingbird flies upside down to reach his bill in there to sip, or her bill, sip, 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 and then get pollen all over its face, and then move from columbine to columbine to columbine. There's one moth that's got a very long, can do it, but not very many can pollinate the columbine. That's what columbine really relies on hummingbirds. Trumpet creeper is a lot like the honeysuckle. It's a vine that will spread, spread, spread. If you got a wall, you got to have a wall or a building. And this one has a long blooming season into summer. So, but you do have to keep it tamed down. Next thing you know, it'll cover your house. Of course, that would be pretty. It's orange and all that. Anyway, but again, it's a long tubular flower that hummingbirds can pop their little bills inside and take a sip or two of that nectar and then move on and on and on. And also at the same time, hummingbirds are grabbing every tiny little bug they can find. They need the protein. One of my favorites, cardinal flower. This one blooms later in the season, typically maybe August through the rest of the fall. This is one I really love. We had it grown at Imes near the pond, but I live on a ridge. It's dry, not nearly damp enough for cardinal flower. So finally I thought, well, I'll try to grow it in a container, so one of those half gallon or half beer barrels. and planted cardinal flower in it, and that's easy to keep damp. Easy to keep that one area damp, and it does great. It's in front of the window of my studio, and hummingbirds do come in. I see them come in to take sips of the cardinal flower. It's very beautiful. It's very late in the season. Yes.
And if you have a pond, I have mine right in the pond, and it loves it.
Okay. Yeah, it loves to be near water. So yes, but I'm not near water. So anyway, you can, if you're not near water, you can grow it in the container. I said probably many of these things. Bee balm is another one that is more of a fall blooming flower that hummingbirds really love, and once you get it going, it comes back year after year after year and spreads. So it's a very pretty, flower for your garden. This one, this is a twofer. This is the host plant for the monarch butterflies. So we're all supposed to plant common milkweed, but hummingbirds get the nectar. They don't get into the sticky white sap, so they'll nectar it. But this is not something you put in your center of your garden, because it'll take over. This, if you got a ditch or a back property, that's where you plant it, because it'll slowly spread. So, and you don't want it particularly as a centerpiece. You'll start popping up in your lawn. But just put it somewhere a little further away, but you'll attract not only hummingbirds to it, but monarch butterflies during their season to lay eggs. So it's kind of a twofer plant. Now let's look at some of these seed-producing plants. If you could put in a sunflower and have an indigo bunting pop down for a snack, you'd go, oh my gosh, look at that indigo bunting, which we have only in the summertime, which they're not easy to see because they love the tops of trees, the indigo bunting. But if they'll come down occasionally to find food, and of course, that's the sunflower. And again, you perhaps don't want this many sunflowers, but again, that's where we get sunflower seeds. But some areas around out the wildlife management area out beyond Himes plant a field of sunflowers for the birds to come in the fall. And because in the fall, those beautiful flowers, each one's a seed feeder. So sunflowers. Coneflowers is one of my favorites. I particularly like purple coneflower. Like this, and here's kind of sort of a twofer as well. But now that's a monarch butterfly. That's actually a female monarch butterfly. You can tell by the venation on the wings, they're very thick. Male monarchs have very thin black stripes. But it's only there for nectar and for food. It's not there to lay eggs, because again, they only lay eggs on milkweed. But it's purple coneflower, like bee balm. A nice garden with bee balm and purple coneflower. If their perennials will come back, they'll come back. Oh my gosh, these are gorgeous. But in the fall, you don't deadhead your coneflower. Each one is a little seed feeder, and finches. Finches are seed eaters. That's all they eat. They don't eat berries, but they'll come in. So there is a practice, say in August, to deadhead your coneflower, cut off the tops, so maybe they'll bloom one more time. But October, don't do that, because you'll have goldfinches popping in to eat all the seeds, So that's, my friend Betty from Kansas took that photograph, sent it to me. And then we've got a couple of native thistles. We've got the swamp thistle and pasture thistle that is a nice plant and not necessarily for the middle of the garden. Well, you can put it there. But the joy of thistles is this. It produces fluff, or what the botanists call pampas. But that's what goldfinches, they wait too late to nest. And this is what the female goldfinch wants to line her nest with. And so if you've got some thistle, you'll see the female goldfinches come in and grab some fluff and go up and line her nest with it. Okay, whoop, let's try that one. Okay, now let's go back to berry producing shrubs and trees. There's several in the area, and I'm gonna do the native ones. And again, it may be, you have to kind of look to find these at local nurseries. And again, that's the photograph of the cedar waxwing. Cedar waxwings primarily only eat fruit. So if you want cedar waxwings to be around. Sarvisberry blooms very early. It's a tall, spindly tree, but there's several shorter species. Anyway, it blooms early, February. So you got something to look at in February, and it's called serviceberry. Do you know this? It's called serviceberry. Our ancestors, particularly further to the north, if one of our ancestors passed away, the ground was frozen. We could not dig a grave. And so we wrapped our ancestor up and either put them in the loft of the barn or in a snowdrift or somewhere extra cold. That's where they would spend until the serviceberry started to bloom, because that was an indicator that the ground had thawed out. And then that's when all of a sudden, end of February, there'd be a lot of funerals. Okay, let's get Granddad out of the snow. We can dig a grave now. So that's where the name comes from. And ministers would travel from community to community because, okay, it's funeral service time. So that's where the name comes from. Or Granddad Homer always called it Sarvis. Yeah, the Sarvis is blooming. But anyway, it's a lovely, lovely early bloom. And you know how it is? February. You want to see something beautiful. You want to see something blooming. And then it produces berries usually by June, and that's right about the time that cedar waxwings will start to raise their family. So they're looking for very early, they're looking for trees and shrubs that produce berries very early because they're getting ready to feed their young, and they feed their young berries. So it's a great little short tree that blooms early and produces fruit by June. Most of the trees and other things that we're going to look at produce their fruit later in the season, summer and fall. But no, service is very early. Oh, you want to make a catbird happy. Catbirds love this plant. This is American black elderberry, and you can also make elderberry wine. But and the catbirds probably know that. Anyway, it'll form a nice. It's a tall, very tall wildflower that forms a nice thicket. And and again, you will start having catbirds come visit it, and other birds that eat berries. But catbirds are very fond of elderberry and blackberry. I didn't include blackberry, but that's one of their faves. Who's next? Black haw viburnum. There's several species of viburnum that do produce berries in the fall. At Imes, I worked there so long. Near where the red-tailed hawk lives, tiger, there's a whole wall of black haw viburnum. It gets very tall, and it produces all these lovely, I may have taken a photo there, I don't recall, all these wonderful fruits in the fall. So it's kind of a fall producing. And again, as it starts to get colder, robins switch to berry fruits. They can't find earthworms anymore. So they'll eat whatever insect they can find, but robins then starts looking for berries around. Another one of my favorites is American beautyberry. They're incredibly gorgeous in the fall. There's magenta berries in cluster. They bloom. We had these in the front of the visitor center at Imes, and they get tiny little clusters of white flowers in like July. You barely notice the flowers, but then all of a sudden, boom. And when I worked there, people would come, what is that bloom? What is those fruit out there? Fruit. It's American beautyberry. And mockingbirds go nuts over them. Mockingbirds will try to take them over if they can. So that's a mockingbird eating American beautyberry. Again, it blooms it produces fruit late September, October. Gorgeous. Well, you can't go wrong with flowering dogwood. As most people know, it's the host plant. It blooms early, and it's the host plant for a tiny blue. And by host plant, that simply means the female blue azure butterfly looks for dogwood to lay her eggs on, just like milkweed is the host plant for monarchs. Each different species of butterfly. Maybe we should do that class someday. the females look for a different host plant. And so for this one, there's a tiny blue butterfly, it's about that big, and she lays her eggs on flowering dogwood leaves. And then again in the fall, it's a bonanza of red fruits. That's a summer tanager, I think, that's eating the red berries from a flowering dogwood. Cardinals love it. In fact, I think I've mentioned this before, the more bright red berries a male cardinal eats in the fall, the brighter red his spring plumage is. So he's healthier, he's eating a lot of fruit, and a young female cardinal, or an unmated female cardinal, she will pick the brightest red male available. He's healthy and he's good looking. So anyway, dogwoods are great for, well, you know, looks count somewhere along the line. Who's next? Spice bush. This is an interesting one. They grow along the river trail at times, so they do need a damper soil, and they bloom early as well to produce fruits later in the season. And it's simply called spice bush because our ancestors, and again, I'm from Gatlinburg. I had real hillbillies, mountaineers, that lived in the Smokies before it was a national park. They would gather spice bush berries and dry them in the windowsill or something until they dried out like a coffee bean, and run it to the coffee mill and sprinkle as a spice for their food, because their food typically was, no offense, Grandma, but was kind of bland. So this was it was kind of an allspice flavoring they would put on their food from these berries. Of course, birds eat them too.
Steve, isn't it also the host plant for the spice bush swallowtail?
It is also yes. Thank you very much. It is also the host plant for the spice bush swallowtail, which is a blue swallowtail butterfly. Again, another reason you do this, you're creating biodiversity around your house. And in many cases, whatever plant may help a butterfly and may attract a bird too. That's the way nature is. You don't want monocultures of the same thing everywhere. There's several species of holly, and that produce berries in the fall and this time of year for our decoration. So holly. And then there's a particular holly called winterberry holly. Bluebirds love it. And this is one odd holly in that it drops its leaves in the fall. So it just had, next thing you know, it doesn't have any, it's like it's passed, but it's just covered with berries. So that's winterberry holly, and we're at time. Okay, we'll wrap up with this. Danger, danger. There's two shrubs that are not native, that were brought by our ancestors. Avoid, if you got them, cut them out. Get rid of them, or they will take over your entire backyard. They're like kudzu. And sadly, this is one, a mere bush honeysuckle. It'll dominate a whole area. And birds eat the berries and help it spread. But it's one that, if you leave it alone, your whole yard will be it. You'll be out there whacking it back. So you can tell it, it leaves out early March. So it outcompetes the other native plants. It develops a honeysuckle flower in May, which is really pretty. But then it produces these berries, there's two berries that look like cinnamon red hots. Remember those? Mm-hmm. Oh. When you were a kid, if you had a pocket full of cinnamon red hots, you were happy. Of course, you were all puckered up all day. Anyway, it produces two berries out of spots. So that's another way you can identify two everywhere. But birds do eat it, but you really don't want it. It is considered an invasive plant, as invasive as kudzu. And then the last one, and is privet, English privet. Our English ancestors loved a nice tight hedgerow, and they brought English privet and kept it chopped back. It does produce those tiny little purple berries in the fall that birds spread, but it will take over your backyard. Next thing you know, you'll only have a yard of solid privet or solid honeysuckle, bush honeysuckle. So I think that finishes me. Any questions, guys? And now we introduce
You have a
Tiffany.
question?
Wait, there's a question.
I had a
You have a
question.
question?
Question.
The coral honeysuckle, is that Major Wheeler? Do you know?
Is it one?
Major Wheeler, it's a species. that
Yes, I think
everybody
so, and
sells.
it is a native honeysuckle.
Okay,
It's
I
only,
wanted to
it's,
make sure that,
it's the only native honeysuckle, because we have Japanese honeysuckle and the one I just showed
yeah.
that are non-native, yes.
Okay, Stephen, there are two nurseries that I know of where you can get native plants. One is Overhill in Lenore City. I think it's Lenore City. And then the other one is Native Plant Rescue at the Arboretum here in Knoxville. Carries plants that they've rescued that you can get very inexpensively. Check the website.
Did everybody hear that? Okay.
There's another one north in Clinton.
And there's one. Yes, but you remember his name? Anyway, you do have to look around for a nursery that specializes in native plants. Okay. Very much, thank you.
Surprise, I'm your ending. No, I'm just kidding, I'm not. That wouldn't be much of a surprise. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Tiffany, I'm the store manager here. A little bit about me, real quick. I came from a 15-year career in law enforcement, and I started feeding birds probably 20 years ago, and that was my outlet, was to come home and be able to watch the birds. And I did everything. I worked my way through the law enforcement gamut, from dispatch to corrections to patrol, and then when I finally got out of it, I was a crime scene investigator. So my husband was also in law enforcement, so it was kind of some dark times in our house. You never want to talk, oh, how was your day? Well, how was your day? So I started working part-time here because I was a customer, and that was my joy and my outlet. And 10 years ago, this past July, I started doing this full-time. So that's kind of my background and kind of the experiences I have and the knowledge I have. So most everything that I know comes from personal experience and trial and error. So I've tried just about everything and know what works in my yard. But we're gonna go through a couple of things on how to, he talked about the natural stuff, we're gonna talk about the supplemental stuff, okay? So creating a bird-friendly yard, it's actually creating a wildlife-friendly yard. So keep that in mind as we go through this. Just a little quote up there. So you guys have probably seen on our front window up there that 1 in 4 birds has just gone since the 1970s. So that's about 3 billion, so 1 in 4. And it's primarily because of habitat destruction, right? So we need more land to build more stuff, which we're taking the land away from the birds. So this is just a little statistics on just grassland birds. So 720 million were lost since 1970, and the 3 and 4 eastern meadowlarks lost. I mean, that's it doesn't sound big, but that's huge, 53%, right? So while all of that's negative, there is some stuff that's positive, because we have this got our attention, and we're like, wait a minute, we need to do something. So through conservation efforts and people doing what we're talking about doing today, we've actually gained 35 million waterfowl since 1970, right? So we're on the upswing now. And also 15 million raptors, okay? So what we're gonna talk about during this, and I am gonna try and speed this up a little bit because of the fun ending, but these are gonna be the 2 things we're gonna cover. How to certify your yard as a wildlife habitat, and the components that you have to have in your yard to make that happen. And there's some natural and there's some supplemental in there too, okay? Which the sheets that passed out, there's a check sheet on the back that you can kind of check off when you have everything set up in your yard that you need. So they say 4, but there's, as you see, there's actually 5 up there. But the major components you have to have are food, water, shelter, a place to raise young, and sustainable practices. So this is what you guys have. This is your handout that I gave you guys. So food for wildlife, natural. This is what Stephen Lyn talked about. But so a lot of these pictures are from my yard. So This right here, the goldfinch, that's a sunflower that I have planted that is, if you look at the other side, it's ugly. I mean, it's just gone to seed. But those goldfinches loved it. And so did the cardinals. So definitely, even though it's ugly and you don't like looking at it, leave it. Don't deadhead it. So this is our jam. This is what we're about here, is the supplemental. So a lot of people think that when you feed birds, you're like, oh, they're not gonna be able to find food on their own, and that is the myth. They will. They will always take a natural source over a supplemental source, okay? So that is literally all we're doing, is just supplementing their diet. Especially in the winter when it's cold and the insects are not as abundant. Obviously seeds are not as abundant, so that's when they rely on us more. But you're never gonna make them totally dependent on you, okay? Y'all bear with me, I haven't done one of these in a minute, so. There's different types of feeders that you can put in your yard. One that we're gonna talk about is called a foundational feeder. That's the most important one. That's gonna be your largest feeder that you put in your yard that always remains full. So it can be, this feeder right here is this. This is called the Flying Bistro. So this is, I love this. I have 3 of these in my yard. So they hold the seed cylinders, which are these right here. And if you guys aren't familiar with seed cylinder feeding, it's fantastic. It lasts a lot longer than loose seed. And it also, because it's held together with a gelatin, it causes the birds to stick around a little longer, so you get to see them longer. They're not just flying in and grabbing a seed, taking off, okay? So this is sturdy enough to hold this size or the larger size, okay? So this can actually be, depending on what size cylinder you use, this could be your foundational feeder. Because depending of the activity in your yard, it could last you a month or 2, or some people it lasts them a couple days. So that just depends on the activity in your yard. But the good thing about this is it's a multi-use feeder, so you can actually put like your bark butter bits or mealworms or something around the bottom as well. Okay. So this is in my yard. That's the yellow-bellied sapsucker. That was last year when we had all the snow. This is also in my yard. This is my foundational feeder, which is, I tried to set up everything that you see in these pictures so you can actually, this is what the foundational feeder is. So I keep Tree Nutty in here, which is the screen bag. It's really high in fat and it's high in protein, and it's got added calcium, which is really good in the wintertime. So you want to keep a good winter food that's high in fat in your foundational feeder, and then the tray gives you the option to add other stuff in there too, so you can put peanuts in there and stuff like that. But you absolutely want to make sure that it stays full all the time, because if you don't get out there, if your secondary feeders, your finch feeder and stuff like that go empty, that's fine. But you want to have a food in a feeder that all birds can eat, and a feeder that all birds can eat from. So when you look at these feeders that have the little perches here, that is very difficult for cardinals to get on. So cardinals are forward-facing eating birds. So if you notice, they're typically on the ground. So it's hard for them to sit sideways and turn their heads. They're so big, and then their heads are normally above the port. So with something like this, keep that in mind. That space right there allows them to sit and face forward and eat. So when you're thinking about putting that one foundational feeder in your yard, be thinking about that. You want something that all birds can get on. And by all birds, yeah, it means like starlings and stuff too. I know there is no perfect answer to that. So, but you do want to make sure that it's got a food that all birds can eat. So you don't want just straight black oil sunflower. You're eliminating your bluebirds and your goldfinches right there, because they can't crack that shell. So think of a blend that you can put in there, and a feeder that all birds can get on. Okay, so specialty feeders. They're just designed to attract specialty birds. So the finch feeder is going to be just that, just for finches. It's got the tiny little holes. You're not gonna have your blue jays and your bluebirds and your cardinals and all that getting on here. This is gonna be a secondary or a specialty feeder, okay? There are ways that you could feed goldfinches with your other feeders, but this is just an independent specialty secondary feeder. You also have like chickadees and stuff like that, and the downy woodpecker love that feeder. So in something like that, you want to make sure you're using a finch blend like this. It's got the Niger or the sunflower chips in it, or just straight crushed sunflower chips. All right, so suet feeders. Suet feeders are extremely important in the winter for insect-eating birds. When the insects are gone, they'll turn typically to suet. Okay, there's a bunch of different ways that we'll talk about that you can offer suet, but this is just your traditional suet feeder with the tail prop. And this shows actually what a tail prop does. So a lot of people ask, what's that panel on the bottom? It's a tail prop because woodpeckers' tails are heavy. That's what keeps them upright on the tree. So if you have just your little square suet feeder, you may notice woodpeckers on there and they're flipped underneath like this. That's because their tail is so heavy. So that's exactly what that does. It just props something for them to prop their tail on to keep them upright. You can do hot pepper suet. There's hot pepper. Hot pepper is going to be a squirrel resistant way to feed.
Squirrels out of your yard.
It does, and it works super well for most people. Some people are like, oh, my squirrels will eat it. There's new products out now that we have that are the hottest on the market that are twice as hot. We've got really good feedback about that, but there are different ways to keep it squirrel and raccoon proof by either hot pepper or baffling.
Isn't that because the squirrel and the raccoons are the only ones that have taste buds? Birds?
So yes, so birds have a few taste buds, but they don't work like ours do. So they don't taste that the hot of the capsaicin, I think it is. They don't taste that. They also, what gives us mammals that the sensation of hot when you eat something is actually a protein that's in our taste buds that birds lack. So they can't feel that sensation of the hot. And they actually eat that capsaicin seed in the wild when it grows wild. So yeah, birds doesn't bother them at all. Squirrels and raccoons, it's like that, like us, they can smell it, they can taste it. And a lot of times, squirrels will smell it and that's enough to keep them away, so.
Tiffany?
Yeah.
What's the shelf life on suet outside?
It depends on the weather. I mean, it will mold if you get, rain on it and stuff. The one thing about suet though, if it molds, you can just kind of slice that part off. It's just on the outside.
Okay.
But in the summertime, there's a no melt that you want to use or it gets nasty. And then in the winter, we go to straight suet. So it just depends on the weather.
Because what I've been seeing is mine's been molding a lot more than I would have expected it to.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Do you go in there and just kind of cut that off? Yeah. A lot of it's just weather dependent, where you had it hanging or something like that. But the shelf life of actual suet is pretty long. You can put it in the you can store it in the freezer. Okay.
My birds won't eat the no-melt.
Oh, really? A lot of people say that. A lot of people say that there is a difference. The no melt has cornmeal in it that keeps it from melting.
Yeah, they
So
won't touch it.
there are a lot of people that say that.
Yeah.
I personally don't do the square suets. I do bark butter, but I've heard that a lot. So we have tried to start keeping in some. I know suet. Do you use regular suet during the summer, or do you just not do it?
No, I usually put out just regular. It doesn't last long, so.
Okay. Yeah. So we try to keep some in stock in the summer because some people are willing to go ahead and do it, even though it gets kind of nasty. I think the melting point for regular suet's like 97. So, but yeah, you're not the first person that has said that. Yeah, you're not the first person that has said that. Okay, so this is my favorite thing, bark butter and bark butter bits. So this is also at my house. Bark butter is, so that's a ruby crown kinglet that comes in the winter. What he's eating are bark butter bits. So those are just little balls of suet. And the cool thing about those is you can offer them just straight. That's this tray on my deck with just bark butter bits poured in there. Or you can mix them with your seed. You can mix them with your mealworms. You can mix them with anything. And they're really good for the small guys to come in, grab it, and take off with it, okay? And then the bark butter spread, that's probably my favorite. It doesn't require a feeder. You don't have to have a feeder, you just have to have a tree. So you can just spread the bark butter on there. That's hot pepper bark butter, so the squirrels will leave it alone. And there's over 150 species that will eat that. And it is the one food that, see if I can get this right, it is the one food that attracts the number of species of birds year round, above anything else. So it does require a little bit more on our part because you got to keep up with it and go out there and keep filling it up or putting it out on the tree. But the good thing about serving it this way is, that's in a knot hole about eye level. But you can take it and just kind of sling it on the ground or spread it at the base of the tree for your ground feeders. So it's a great way. You can you can spread it on your cylinder. There's all different ways you can use it, and it's a great way to feed. So again, it attracts everybody. Cardinals, bluebirds. Yeah, it's the one, there's no other food that attracts a wider variety of birds all year round, so I did have that right. Over 150 different species have been known to eat it.
Will deer eat it?
I don't know. That's a good question.
We have a lot of deer.
Do you?
Yeah.
I don't know about it, how hot pepper works on deer either. I don't know if you could, that comes in hot pepper and regular, so, but yeah, I'm not sure. This is in my yard as well. This has been several years ago. So this is, I always say, don't forget your ground feeders. You know, in the winter, be sure and toss something out there on the ground for them. So I just use millet, right? It's cheap, and the ground feeders love it. And a lot of the wintering ground feeders love it. So in that picture are cardinals, juncos, white-throated sparrows, towhees, and I think there's a squirrel in there. But they love that because it's got all that brush back there, and it's kind of down at the end of my yard, so I can just take it and throw it down there and not worry about it, and it's really, they love it. It's great. So don't forget about those guys either, okay? All right. This is my front yard, and I put this in here because I want people to know that it is possible to feed birds and squirrels. So it is possible to make your yard actually wildlife friendly, not just bird friendly. So, I don't think this is pointing, oh it does. Well, you can't really see it, but over here on this side on my left is a squirrel feeder on this tree. In the middle is the bark butter where you saw, and then right beside that is an eliminator. This, hanging in the tree, okay? And everybody eats harmoniously. Nobody tries to mess with anybody else's stuff, and it's really fun to watch. And quite honestly, the squirrels are a hoot to watch. I love watching them. So this is the interactive nut box. So that is this, and that's the squirrel feeder that's on my tree. And it takes them a little while, but they will figure out how to open that up, and it's really fun for them to watch them. When he first figured it out, he crawled down here and put his front feet down here and pushed, and it flipped him off of it. Yeah, it's really fun to watch, and you know you're feeding everybody that way. So it is possible to do if done the right way. Okay, water. So water is the next big thing, and we always harp on water because that kind of gets left. But it kind of gets forgotten about. People think more about the food and the feeders and I want to attract all these birds. Wildlife need water for drinking and for bathing, and they need it year round. I mean, the birds get dirty in the winter just like they do in the summer, right? There is actually, there's a story that goes with this, but there's a myth that birds' feet will freeze to a metal bird bath. That is totally incorrect. We had someone return, many years ago, had somebody return a metal bird bath because they had read online that the bird's feet could freeze to it. It doesn't happen. They've got the way their blood flows and constricts, they're made to be able to for their feet not to freeze to stuff. So don't worry about that when you're thinking about putting your bird bath out in the winter. Heated bird baths I can't say enough about. So again, this is an old picture, but this is at my house. I tried for years and years to get bluebirds, and I couldn't get them. They sat on the fence and just looked at me. And then I had somebody say, well, do you have water? I was like, no. Do I put water out? And this was the first winter when I put water out. So, and that's it. Heated bird bath, I use my heated bird bath year round. This is the one I have now. That's such an old picture. It fits 20-inch and 14-inch. It fits in our regular bird bath holders. But the neat thing about this is it comes with hardware. It comes with hardware for your deck. But in the summertime, I just wind the cord up in there, and it works just like a regular bird bath. So you don't really have to switch it out all the time. And that one lasted me for 10 years? At least 10 years. So they last forever. And it's super important, especially in the wintertime right now. There are also heaters that you can put in existing bird baths that are, they're not gonna be, that one is 150 watt, and the heating element runs all the way through the bird bath so that it'll keep all of the water defrosted. It's not like a spa. It's not hot. They're not like kicked back in there.
They don't sit in it and eat nut butter and.
No, they don't have like their little feet propped up or anything. So all it does is it has an internal thermostat, and it will kick on when the water hits freezing, and it just keeps it from freezing. That's all it does. So you'll see the steam coming off of it, like in the mornings when you go out, but it's not like they're in there with like, well, I guess in my case, a beer, in the, kicked back, just chilling. So it's not, it doesn't heat the water, it just keeps it from freezing.
What about, I thought the water needed to be moving.
Doesn't have to be moving. Moving will, in the summertime, it's more important to keep it moving because that's when the mosquitoes are around. The movement is what, mosquitoes can't lay eggs on moving water. So when you put water wigglers in there, you put dripper misters in there, something to keep that water circulating will help eliminate that. But in the wintertime, I mean, if it's freezing, it's not your, water wigglers and stuff aren't gonna work, they're just gonna freeze up. So you just wanna make sure you're dumping it out and refilling it about every 3 days.
We have that circulator in ours for one of your trays, and I have to go out occasionally and she
Make,
does.
knock the ice off of it.
Yeah, or I take a pot of hot water out and pour it in there.
Yeah, and just pour it over it to melt the ice that's in it. Yeah. This is also in my yard. That's the only way I've ever gotten cedar waxwings because, like what Lyn was saying was having like the burying bushes. I have none. I don't have this. The only thing I don't have in my yard is any kind of burying bush. And these little suckers will sit up in the tree and I can hear them and I'm like, there's water right there. And that is the only time, and every time they usually come, I'm like in the shower or I'm doing something, and Warren will be like, there's cedar waxwings. And I'm like, of course there are. So this was just one time, the only time I've ever seen them all come down at once and drink. So, but this is an example of, if you just do feeders, you're missing out on all kinds of different birds you could be getting. Because not all birds eat seed, but all birds need water. So just simply by, I have nothing in my yard that they could eat, but by adding that water, I was able to attract them down where I could actually enjoy them. So water is super, super important. Okay, cover and shelter. So that can be, it can be natural and it can be supplemental. So natural, this over here, this pretty little landscaped area, that's nice for cover. This over here, this is my yard. This is an area in my yard, and the other day, my husband's like, that looks just like junk, and I was like, it is not junk, it's an ecosystem. So that's what I tell people. I'm like, it's not junk, that is bird shelter, that's its own little ecosystem. And I've seen everything from towhees to flickers to wrens to, anything you can, they're all in there, on it, all around it. So yeah, it doesn't look pretty, but you can find a spot in your, unfortunately that's right when you pull in my driveway. I wouldn't advise putting it there, but if you have somewhere, we have a lot of trees in our yard, so we always have big limbs that are falling. So if you have somewhere in your yard, you can kind of build a brush pile. Perfect, brush piles are fantastic for birds, yeah. Okay, supplemental cover. So roosting pockets are really, really popular. This one is hanging literally, I could walk out my front door and reach up and touch it. So something like this, you can see the little wren's butt, see his little tails sticking up? So there's 2 of them in there, and they go to bed every night about 6:30 or 7, and they wake up every morning about 6:30? You can hear them like yelling at each other. So the good thing about shelter, roosting pockets, they're not gonna make a mess. They don't bring in nesting material. They don't bring in food, they don't raise young in here, they're not pooping in here or anything. They're literally getting in here to get out of the elements, okay? So it's very clean.
Is there a specific direction that you should point them, the entrance?
No, just not towards prevailing winds. You don't want the wind howling in there, but no,
Because I've got several in the yard, and at least three of them have been there for at least 5 years, and I have yet to see anybody going in or out.
Are they close to your house?
No?
Yeah, roosting pockets you want to be really close to your house, because those are gonna be wrens mostly that go in there.
I've got a couple that are tucked in on a trellis around some shrubbery, okay,
Yeah.
and within a tree.
I don't know, the people that have had success with these always hang them really close to their house, yeah. And that's even that's at a corner on my covered front porch, so it's actually underneath him is the porch. So that kind of close to your house.
We have a covered front porch and we have a beam that goes across for the support. And I notice when I go out, they startle the heck out of me sometimes. They roost or nest right up next to a support beam like that.
Yeah.
And that's a really good, I'll try
Yeah,
them.
absolutely, yeah, these things are great. Any nesting box can be shelter. Nesting boxes are used for nesting and roosting. This, believe it or not, is an owl box that has never been used by an owl, but I'm okay with that. There's obviously a flicker. Flickers go in there for cover at night. Bluebirds, titmice. I've had squirrels. I mean, everybody uses it, but I'm okay with that because it's providing cover and shelter for the birds when they need it. All right, place to raise young. So that also can be natural or it can be supplemental. This is actually different from the shelter because this is actually giving them a place for courtship and nest building, and you know a lot of birds that nest like in trees and stuff like that. They need somewhere like deep, dense to get into, you know, so they're away from predators and stuff. So there is a difference between cover and a place to raise your young. So this is, obviously you have different kinds. So you have your nest building birds, you have your substrate nesting birds, which are like your doves, is that right? Substrate, did I say that right? Doves, robins, those are the ones that will nest on like the top of your gutter where it comes down. They nest on flat surfaces, okay? So a lot of times the birds, like doves, will nest in covered porches, like what we were talking about, like a cross beam or something like that. So there's 3 different kinds that you need, and then there's the cavity nesters. So there's 3 different kinds of nesting. So just throwing up a nest box isn't going to do it, right? You got to think about all these different things. So like this is in my yard. So this little guy I noticed last year was just working like, I mean, crazy. He was working from like dusk till dawn trying to get this house ready. So you can see that's there. She's like, yeah, I like it. This looks pretty good. I like the view. Because he's doing all the work, and then she's like, yeah, you did a good job. I like it. So this also goes back to when it's dead and it's ugly, just leave it. This tree is still alive, but straight line winds took out the top of that. You can see where it's broken at the top of that branch, that large branch a couple of years ago. So that particular part of that tree was dying, right? That one limb coming off. But look how many times it's been used. Look at, there she is, and you barely see her at the bottom. Look at the hole at the top. So woodpeckers that use the dead wood and the dead trees to nest in and look for bugs, I mean, it's getting used and it's not hurting me, and the tree's still alive and it's causing no danger to fall on my house or my neighbor's house or anything, so leave it, you know? It's really kind of cool to walk out there and see all those different holes in there, knowing that somebody or some animal, you know, found a use for it. All right, so that's a primary nester. Primary nesters build their own nests. They excavate their own. Secondary nesters, which are going to be more your songbirds and what we see in our backyard, they do not excavate their own nest, but they will use a previous cavity that's been excavated, okay? So that's your bluebirds, your titmice, your wrens, or everybody that uses a nest box, okay? The bluebird box here, this is also a bluebird box with the titmouse. So on the email I talked about, you need placement, even the same kind of house with the different placement in your yard can depend on different kinds of birds that you get. So with bluebirds, you know, they like big open areas. So you take a bluebird box. Now let me preface this by saying they're wild animals. So as much as we can watch them and do the exact right thing and set our yards up perfectly, I mean, it's not going to be guaranteed every time that it's going to work because they're still like, and I still like, I mean, that's a perfect spot for bluebirds, but they like to nest in my wren house. It's on the other side of the tree. So I'm like, okay. But you take a bluebird box, you can set it up opening, you know, the opening at the widest or the openest part of your yard, it's gonna be attractive to a bluebird. You take that same house and you set it up between your house and a wood line, and you're gonna be more attractive to a chickadee. If you take that box and you set it up backed up to that wood line, like here, you're gonna be more attractive to a titmouse. So there are different houses for different species, but you can also use the same house and make it work, okay? Having 2 bluebird boxes is also a good idea for eliminating fights between bluebirds and the tree swallows, because they will fight for a bluebird box, and the best way to eliminate that is to put up a second one. They'll be happy with that. One will take one will take the other. Okay, don't forget bats. Again, we're creating a wildlife-friendly yard, right? So this was sent to us by a customer who came in and she had bats in her, like in the eave or whatever of their house. And so she came in and bought that's a triple chamber. That's the second one she bought. She came in and bought a single chamber bat house, which is this right here. And she went home and I think it was the same day. She came back and she's like, I need another one. I was like, some people wait like 10 years to get bats. I'm like, are you sure? And she's like, no, I need another one. I was like, okay. So she got the triple chamber. She went home and set it up, and she sent this to us that evening before we closed. So that's the second one that she set up. And so she just took her ladder, or took her camera and, stood underneath it and took a picture. And I just thought that was such a cool picture. I mean, how often do you get to see that? It looks like a car lot. It looks like the little cars all lined up, facing out. So,
Sardine bats.
yeah, but bats are phenomenal to have at your house. Bats are, they'll eat the mosquitoes. They're fun to watch. They're fantastic. And tree swallows, when we were talking about the bluebirds and the tree swallows fighting, don't diss the tree swallows. Those are daytime bats. And they eat the mosquitoes during the day, so you want those around. Okay, sustainable practices. The one thing I'll say about this is not using pesticides. That's the biggie. Watch what you're spraying in your yard, I think some places have come up with some like non-toxic stuff that's supposed to be better for wildlife, but the fact is, it's not that it's bad or good, that what they're spraying is bad or good for wildlife, it's what it's killing. So, think about spiders, cobwebs, stuff like that. That hummingbirds they build their nests out of those cobwebs. So the things that you would never think that you're like, oh, it's just such a pain, that is somebody's food source or a bird's, way of building a nest or something like that. So, and I know it's annoying, and I've tried to cut out all of the treatments at our house, but we have to treat for mosquitoes. I can't do that. Mosquitoes like me too much. So, but the less of that you can do, the better. Okay.
Use mosquito dunks. They're safe.
Is that what you put in? What do you do with that? Put it in water?
It's a bacterium that kills the mosquito larvae.
Oh, in the water.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, mine are everywhere in the yard. Yeah.
Planted citronella.
Yeah, I've done that. I've sat outside with plants and candles, and it's bad.
Goldfish in your watering things will eat the larva too.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh. Okay, so I thought this was interesting. If everybody converted just half of their lawns to native plants, those 20 million acres are more than the combined areas of the Everglades, Yellowstone, Yosemite, Grand Teton, Canyonlands, Mount Rainier, North Cascades, Badlands, Olympics, Sequoia, Grand Canyon, Denali, and the Great Smoky Mountain Parks, all together. I mean, that's a pretty impressive comment. So just half of your yard. And this guy knows what he's talking about. He's like a conservationist. He's written a bunch of books, and he's highly regarded, and that's a legit comment. So that's pretty scary to think about. That's all it would take, would be for us to take half our yards and just kind of give it back to what it was before. Okay, so you can get your yard certified. You have all the stuff there. When we talked about food, water, shelter, there are different amounts that you need for each one that's on your thing. I think that for shelter it's 2. You need 2, which can be anything. It can be you planted trees, right? You have bushes, and you have a house up. There's your 2. Water, I think you need 1 source, bird bath. Shelter might be 1 or 2, but again, it didn't all have to be natural, and it didn't all have to be supplemental. Mix it up, right? So when you get certified, this is what your little plaque looks like. You can get your little plaque and put it in your yard. So to wrap up, that's what we talked about. The components to get your yard certified. Wild Birds Unlimited for many, many, many years has been what they call a champion partner with the National Wildlife Federation. So what that means is you can come to any of the stores, you can go online, there's a website on there that we can always get you linked up to we have everything here that you need to get your yard certified, and we have all the knowledge and information to get you where you need to go to get your yard certified. So if you have any questions or anything like that, you can ask, or there's the website on the paperwork. So in the end, we will serve only what we love only what we understand, and we will understand only what we're taught. So continue to learn. Okay, so that's all for me. So I think I did it. I was 10 minutes. So if you guys thought that was good, just wait. So how many of you heard earlier in the week about the black-chinned hummingbird that was first time ever seen in Knox County? A couple of you? Okay. Well, the person whose house that showed up at is a customer and an attendee of the classes here. Kristen Smith is here, and we've got pictures, and she is going to talk about how you saw it, the banding process with Mark, and all the different people that have shown up and from how far they've come to photograph this first ever recorded black-chinned hummingbird in Knox County. Surprise! Yeah. We're yours. Or you can just scream. And then there's all your and if you want to look up here, that's the next slide.
This is Hugo the hummingbird, coincidentally named. He showed up last Friday, Black Friday. We were getting ready to go to Fantasy of Trees, getting our children ready, and Stephen was on the couch and he was like, "There's a hummingbird," and I was like, "Don't do that." And he was like, "There's a hummingbird," and I was like, "No, it's probably a chickadee on crack." And sure enough, I look over and there's the hummingbird. So message Stephen, message a couple of friends, and I was like, "Look, I have a hummingbird," and they're like, "That hummingbbird's different, Kristen." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, it is. It is." And so we're zooming in. Stephen's like, "I think it's a black chin." And I go look up black chin, and I message Jack. I'm like, "It's a black chin." He said, "Message Mark." And so I messaged Mark. Mark came to our house Tuesday, which was 3 days later. He looked at the weather, he looked at the wind patterns, he looked at all the things. Right after our first frost, Monday, it was 19 degrees this Tuesday morning, and he showed up, and there's his station right on our kitchen counter. It will forever be highlighted as an awesome moment for us. And so there he is putting our feeder down here in the bottom left, and he put it up inside there. And so he did have 2 native flowers. I want to say it was sativa of some sort or I don't know, it was a long purple balloon flower. And then it looked like a coral honeysuckle in there as well. So he took 2 native flowers and then also our feeder in there. And it took less than 12 minutes for Hugo to go into the feeder. For something like this, like they were saying, he is finding pollen somewhere. He did have pollen all over his beak, we saw, but he will come and get what we call the junk food source, whole food source being the native wildflowers. So he did come in and get it because everything else is scarce. So there he is, and Mark's getting ready. You can't really see his gorget, which is his beard. You can't really see it quite yet, but those are his bands that he banded him on. And if y'all ever get the chance to go to IMS in their Hummingbird Festival, you need to do that because you can see all of this, not on your kitchen counter, where you can see it at IMS. And he weighed 3.4 ounces.
Grams.
Or grams, thank you. 3.4 grams, which is teeny tiny. But there on the right, you can see his purple gorget. So the black chin obviously is not from around here, if anybody knows where they are from, but they are from the western side, all the way from California, all the way down to Nevada, to all the way down to New Mexico. So all week, once word got out, it was, "Can I see your black chin hummingbird? Can I see your black chin hummingbird? Can I see your black chin hummingbird?" And so this was all week, day in and day out, from about 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. every day. Luckily, I work from home, so I can arrange to have people in. One of the categories during, believe it or not, during when the viewing was here on Jeopardy was songbirds. So everybody is over there taking photos, and they're like, what is a goldfinch? And then they're like, "What is a bluebird going?" And I did not get a photo of it, but right after this was Heartland series, and if anybody can guess who was spotlighted on Heartland series afterwards, when I had a whole bunch of photographers, was Stephen Lyn. Yeah, so they're like, there's a hummingbird, and because you're trained at this point, every flash that went by the window, and it was a hummingbird going by, opening up for that. So there he was Thursday morning when it was like 15, 17 degrees. The sun's not even up. We live just right over the hill from here. The sun's not even up over Westland yet, and he's waiting. He's like, "Lady, thank you for taking your feeder in at night. We're getting warmers, but right now I have to take them in every night." So that's Hugo. On what they were kind of saying today about certifying your yard, we're almost a year into being a habitat for our yard. We started a year ago doing the process. We haven't had pesticides for over 2 years, and I've seen a huge intake of just natural birds. We've eliminated most of the privet. There's still some privet and some honeysuckle. I can't get rid of it all, but every flower that we have is native, every tree that we have is native, and it obviously shows to this here. So I really can't thank them enough for allowing us to have this. So, ta-da.